When I was near death after a terrible accident, they stood beside my hospital bed and said, "She's not our daughter. Let her go." They walked away as if I meant nothing to them. A week later, they returned to claim the inheritance, but all they found was a letter that drained the color from their faces. Hey, read it. I don't recall the crash. Just the sounds of metal bending, glass breaking, and the world crumbling around me. When I opened my eyes, everything was white. White walls, white sheets, white lights blinding me, and intense pain. So much pain that I couldn't even scream. Later, I was told I was lucky to survive, that most wouldn't have made it. But lying in that hospital bed, I didn't feel lucky. Half my body was broken. My lungs were filled with machines. The first people I saw were doctors, then nurses, and finally my parents. At least I thought they had come for me. When they entered, I tried to smile. Through the wires and tubes, I whispered, "Hi, Mom." "Dad." But their expressions weren't filled with love, it was something else. Dad wouldn't look me in the eye. Mom stood by the door, gripping her purse as if she wanted to escape. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You shouldn't have called us. You shouldn't have brought us into this. Brought them into this." I didn't understand. The nurse looked confused as well. Then my mother said in a cold, steady tone, "She's not our daughter." My heart sank. "Excuse me." The nurse said, "You're listed as her emergency contacts. There's been a mistake." My father interrupted. "We raised her, yes, but she's not really ours." I tried to speak, but the tube in my throat prevented me. Tears streamed down my face, but they didn't notice. They just stood there explaining to the nurse how they couldn't take responsibility and how they needed space to move on. Then my mother looked directly at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw it, that cold emptiness that comes when someone stops viewing you as human. "Let her go," she whispered. "We're done." They turned and left. No touch, nothing. Just the sound of the door closing, marking the end of my world. The nurses tried to comfort me, but I didn't speak for days. How could I? The people I believed would love me unconditionally had just erased me from their lives like a name written in sand. I remained in that hospital for weeks, learning to walk again and breathe without the machines. The whole time, I kept asking myself, why was I adopted? Did they hate me that much? Or was I simply inconvenient? It wasn't until the day I was discharged that I got my answer. A nurse entered with a letter. "This was left for you," she said softly. It was from them. My parents, their handwriting, their names, everything. I opened it with trembling hands, and the words inside shattered me. "We can't carry your burden anymore. You've always brought trouble, and we can't do this again. You were never meant to be ours. Don't contact us. Don't come home." It ended with one final line. "Please understand, this is for your own good." For my own good. Those words haunted me through every sleepless night that followed. But somehow, I got through it, because sometimes survival isn't about strength, it's about spite. A week later, I was released. The doctor said my recovery was miraculous. I called it painful, but it didn't matter. I was alive, and I had nothing left to lose. So I left. I packed my few belongings and moved across the city, starting over with the insurance payout from the accident, just enough to rent a small apartment and find a job. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. Months turned into years. I built something they never thought I could. A life not defined by their absence. A business, a home, real friends. But the funny thing about life is that it always circles back. One morning, I received a call from a lawyer. My father had passed away, sudden heart attack, and my mother had reached out not to reconcile or apologize but to claim my inheritance. Apparently, my late grandfather had set up a trust that would go to me, not them, and they wanted it. I didn't answer her calls or respond to her messages. Instead, I met with the lawyer privately, and we devised a fitting plan. When they arrived a week later, dressed in black and pretending to grieve, the lawyer greeted them at my door. "I'm sorry," he said. "She's not seeing visitors, but she left something for you." He handed them a sealed envelope. Inside was a single letter written in my handwriting. It read, "You stood over my hospital bed and said I wasn't your daughter. You told them to let me die. You walked away from me as if I didn't exist. So now I'm granting your wish. From this day forward, you have no daughter. You have no inheritance. You have nothing. I signed it. The daughter you chose to lose. Later, I heard from the lawyer that my mother fainted when she read it, and my uncle had to drive her home. That was the last I ever heard from them. Now, when I visit the site of the accident, I don't feel pain anymore, just peace. That crash didn't destroy my life. It revealed who truly cared. In the silence of that realization, I found myself. They came back for money, but what they found instead was the truth. They spent a lifetime trying to escape. But what they didn't know was that the accident wasn't what it seemed because someone wanted me gone that night, and I was about to uncover who. 4 months. I believed the accident was fate. A cruel twist of chance that nearly took my life. But fate doesn't leave fingerprints. People do. It started with a call from the insurance company. Routine, they said, just verifying a few final details about the accident report. But then the agent hesitated. Miss Turner, do you know who filed the claim on your behalf that night? I frowned. The hospital. No, he said. A family member. I froze. Who? He checked his file. A woman named Margaret Turner. Your mother. My heart sank. My mother. The same woman who stood at my hospital bed and denied me as her daughter had filed an insurance claim in my name. What kind of claim? I asked. A life insurance claim, he replied. For accidental death. Death, not injury, not recovery, death. For a moment, the room spun. I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might break. Are you sure? I whispered. Yes, ma'am. She filed it 3 hours after your crash. The policy listed her as the sole beneficiary. 3 hours. That was before I even reached the hospital. I ended the call without another word, my pulse racing in my ears. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside my window made me jump. Every shadow looked like guilt wearing my mother's face. The more I thought about it, the more the memories began to blur together. The way my brakes suddenly failed that night, the faint smell of gasoline from earlier that morning, the uneasy expression from the mechanic who had worked on my car just days before. The next day, I went to the repair shop, the same one my father had always used. When the manager came out, he looked surprised to see me. You're alive, I said. Did you work on my car before the accident? He nodded slowly. Your father brought it in, said it needed a brake check. We replaced a few parts and returned it. Are you sure the brakes were fine? I asked. He hesitated. Yes, but there was something odd. Someone called afterward and told us to leave the old parts in the trunk, said you wanted to see them. Old parts? I never saw them. I drove home in silence, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. If my father had handled that car, if he knew what was inside, then maybe the crash hadn't been an accident at all. So, I did something I had been avoiding for years. I went back to the old house. It was empty now, the curtains drawn, dust drifting in the light. But in my father's old study, I found something that made my stomach churn, a folder labeled insurance documents. Inside were several forms, all dated before my accident, all signed by him, and every single one listed my name as the primary policyholder. Then at the very bottom of the stack, I found it, a letter written in my father's handwriting. Margaret, once it's done, claim the payout quickly. Nonetheless, she'll never know. I stared at the words, my breath shallow. I could almost hear his voice again, calm, stern, pretending to protect the family while destroying it from within. They hadn't just given up on me, they'd planned to profit from my death. For hours, I sat there in silence, holding that letter. Every childhood memory, every moment of laughter, every family dinner now twisted into something toxic. And yet, I didn't cry because deep down I'd always known. Love shouldn't have conditions, and theirs always did. 2 weeks later, the court finalized the estate settlements, and just like before, my mother showed up, this time without shame, just greed. She demanded her share, waving forged documents and claiming to be my legal guardian from before our estrangement. The lawyer remained calm. He simply handed her an envelope, just like I once had. Inside were copies of the insurance claim, the letter my father wrote, and my notarized affidavit transferring their portion of the inheritance into a fund for accident victims with no families. The moment she read it, her face went pale, her hands trembled, and when she looked up, I was standing in the doorway. Our eyes met for the first time since that hospital room. You tried to bury me, I said softly. But you forgot. I learned how to climb out. She didn't say a word. Her lips quivered, her eyes filled with tears. But I didn't feel pity anymore, only freedom. "The next time you pray," I whispered, "don't ask for forgiveness. Ask for understanding, because you'll never get either from me." And I walked away. Later that evening, I stood at the site where my car had crashed all those months ago. The bent guardrail had been replaced, and the road was smooth again, as if nothing had ever happened. But I remembered every second, the silence, the darkness, and the choice I didn't get to make that night. Now I visit that spot every year on the anniversary, not out of grief, but gratitude. Because that night didn't destroy me, it revealed me. I survived not just the accident, but also the people who wanted me gone. And in doing so, I learned the most powerful truth of all. Sometimes family isn't blood. It's the fire that forges you after they leave you to burn. They came for the inheritance, but all they inherited was the weight of their own sins.